process that happens to about half the population. Still, talking about menstruation as well as feminine hygiene products can be uncomfortable.
But a proposal in the legislature wants to tackle the stigma and make sure that students in the state have the products they need at all times. Our Marlo Lundak joins us live in the newsroom with more.
Back in 2022, the state legislature voted to remove sales taxes from all period products in the state. And shortly after, those products became free to all women in detention centers and jails in the state, too. And now a new bill in the Nebraska Legislature takes this idea a step further. If passed, Nebraska would join the list of 25 other states that provide free period products in all public schools. It's a story that unfortunately many who menstruate can relate to.
I unexpectedly got my period and bled through my jeans while I was at school in class. I had no menstruational products with me, nor were there any available in the bathroom. I was 11 years old.
That very brave, now 8th grader at Crete Middle School was explaining to members of the legislature why they should support LB 1050. The bill would put free period products in all public school bathrooms.
We provide everything a student needs. We provide them pencils, we provide them paper, we have napkins in the cafeteria, and this is no different.
The bill was brought forward by Lincoln Senator Danielle Conrad.
This measure is really important to bring forward to raise awareness, to reduce stigma, and to increase equity.
But the idea was brought to Conrad by a former Lincoln East High School student.
And every girl who goes to a school where period products are not readily accessible is experiencing period poverty.
Doctors, school administrators, teachers, and students testified Monday night. All of them said period poverty, which is the inability to afford or access feminine hygiene products, is a very real thing.
By providing tampons and pads, schools can help reduce absenteeism, ensuring that students do not miss out on valuable education.
Buying period products is not a priority when food, rent, and gas need to be purchased.
Oh yes, we send products to schools multiple times a week.
Kristen Lowry started Access Period. It's an organization that provides free menstrual products to anyone who needs it. Too often, she hears from educators who are buying the expensive products themselves to ensure that students have access.
They've been calling Access Period, to look for resources or see if we're able to help. And a lot of the time we can, but it's not enough.
Supporters say the availability of period products in schools is also a step in addressing the stigma around conversations about menstruation.
When women don't talk about their needs, we can't meet them.
Now, in order to provide free period products to all public schools, it's estimated that it would cost just over $870,000 every year. If passed, that money would come from the state's general fund, and the program would begin for the 2025-2026 school year. On your side in the newsroom, Marlo Lundak, 6 News.